Election day is behind us, and we're now taking a look at the results of the 2024 election. Your political reporter, Shaun talks with Democrat and Republican analysts about the wins and losses on both sides of the aisle.
I think you can understand what happened in the 3rd District. That Frisch spent so much more money. And, of course, he raised that money because of Boebert 2 years earlier. And he also ran as a Republican shot. I mean, my Lord, every time I saw an ad, I thought, is he the Republican candidate? And so, and then Hurd, he hadn't run before. I think Hurd will win this race and he'll get certified pretty quickly. There's a real warning sign in the 4th District, though. Boebert did lose Douglas County, it looks like. How does a Republican lose Douglas County? Now, the rest of the district is very heavily Republican, the rural areas up and down the Eastern Plains. But I got to tell you, that shows that the party has deteriorated in suburban areas. And I think Republicans need to think about that, why that's happening.
Especially at Douglas County.
Yes.
This is mainstream Republicans for the most part, traditional Republicans in many ways,
and
right?
Shaun, the math statewide is you had to carry Douglas and El Paso by the mid-60s. If a Republican, and of course, if a Republican cannot do that, there is no way to win a statewide election. Not to mention Jeffco Arapahoe and Denver Boulder and the other areas where you have to perform. But that is a real sign of deterioration, and we got to think about that.
I mean, one, the margin is not a surprise. I mean, the polling was always very close. Two, I think we do have 2 third-party candidates in that race that do have a number of votes that exceed the current margin between the Republican and the Democrat, between Caraveo and Evans. And so I think that it just epitomizes what was set up by the redistricting commission to make that the most competitive seat in Colorado. I think Caraveo was a good candidate. She ran a good campaign. She had a lot of money. There was a lot of money for Evans. We saw a considerable amount of PAC money come in, and people got sick of the ads. I mean, so much so that you know, they're probably waking up today and they're like, man, it's, you know, things might not have turned out nationally for us, but we don't have to watch those ads anymore.
That's for sure.
Right.
I know my mom's happy about that. I know, but I do want to say something about the 3rd and the 4th.
Yeah.
I do think with President Trump now becoming the 47th president, that Hurd probably won't face as well-funded of an opponent in 2 years. So I do agree with Dick. I think he'll find himself in a good place in 2 years, but Boebert won't, because people will continue to fund her opponent as much as they want to, because they want to take it out on Trump and her. And I think she's going to continue to face a lot of headwinds in that district. It won't mean that she's going to lose, but you know, she's going to have a hard time getting any type of margins that Ken Buck used to get.
Well, she might lose if you have a strong libertarian candidate in that race on top of Democrats spending.
Yeah,
Good point. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, Dick might want to be a libertarian.
They wouldn't take me.
The Republicans don't even take you some days.
Well, actually, the current leadership of the Republican Party doesn't want me either. So.
We want you to.
I know.
You know, I know that's not on. You know, we hadn't talked about it, but where do Republicans go who haven't signed up with Trump now? I mean, do they sign up with Trump?
Well, the thing about it is, Mike, is that even a Republican like me, I was on board with his policies.
Yeah.
I mean, I loved his tax cuts, his deregulation, his immigration policies, his judicial nominations. I loved all that. My problem with Trump has been his behavior. Stolen elections, January 6th. And so I think most Republicans are going to give him the benefit of the doubt. If he would return to that policy agenda and not have an administration of revenge, that's going to be the big.
But you are going to have that. I do think he will
you're
do
right.
that.
I think unfortunately, I think you're right.
Yeah. I mean, he'll be very inconsistent in how he acts, but I think the policies, you know, will stay in place.
Yeah.
That he had 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Were you surprised when you looked at the map and saw, like I said, the sea of red for the presidential race?
Well, he exit polls again, and we all know that you don't want to read too much into them, but younger people seem to move with him and against, Harris, whereas they were with Biden 4 years ago. And we also saw Latinos, come out a little more in favor of him. And I think that when you see that, I mean, and there's people you're not going to capture in polling in those demographics. You're just not. I mean, my son, who of course voted for Harris, but nonetheless, if somebody, nobody's getting a hold of him for a poll. I mean, he's elusive.
Yep.
And I think
You can't even reach him.
Yeah, no, I texted him this morning, and I won't hear back from him, until I text him again and again. And so I think that it's really hard. I sent, a friend asked me yesterday morning how I felt, and I said I felt like we're going to get clocked, and we did.
And Shaun, I would say,
Why though?
I just felt that. I felt Trump's people were confident they were going into states they shouldn't have been going into, and Harris was, just hyper focused on Pennsylvania with the intent that if they didn't win that, it was over.
I do think too that sliver of undecideds, and there weren't many of them, but there were enough. They had to decide. Okay, I hate Trump as a person, but I loved his policies. I think she's a better person, but her policies were horrible.
She ran more on a feeling like we need to just move beyond this. We need to move forward, which I got and I didn't disagree with. But Trump dug into the economy and how people felt about inflation and immigration in the swing states. I mean, again, I think we're in a great place here. I mean, what a great state to live in. And I think we're pretty economically well off. I mean, certainly there's disparity where, wherever you want to look for it. But compared to some of these swing states, I mean, I have relatives in Pennsylvania. You drive through the old coal country, and it's desolate.
Yeah.
And so that's what set Colorado apart. That's why we looked at the map and we saw this sea of red, and then what's this blue state here?
Yeah.
Well, our population is younger and more educated too, and I think that makes it kind of and it goes to the economic advantage we have, and I think that kind of sets Colorado apart as well. And so
Is that we're more educated and we have more money.
yes,
And as a result of that, we're more likely.
And we're more liberal too.
and more liberal.
And more-
Yeah. I mean, Denver has certainly been on the forefront of that in the growth over the last 5 years. Some of that's moderating, but what it comes down to is that people probably will see us as that oasis in the middle of the country.
But I would say, Shaun, a year ago right now, we were talking about the Proposition HH going down in flames by 20 points. Those same people who hate Trump and voted that way, I think they still could be right of center in terms of economic issues. And if that ever happens, I know you're thinking about, you heard Curtis earlier. I would love for Democrats to put a TABOR repeal on the ballot. I think that would be a marvelous debate, and we would win. And I think that would be a big mistake for Democrats.
Even after we have all these tax measures, and I recognize there were a few that failed, but Jeffco removed every cap there is on revenue retention and spending.
Yeah.
In Arapahoe County's won 75-25.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so this is overwhelming. I have always thought of Colorado as socially liberal and fiscally conservative, although the fiscal conservative has shifted a little too over time, but I've still said, okay, right of center on fiscal issues. I don't think that anymore so much.
Well,
I really don't.
I will say this too. If TABOR is repealed someday, Colorado is headed to California. It will not be a good place to live anymore. And because there will be no fiscal restraint at all on government, and that will slowly undermine the entire state. And that's what's happened in California, and it will happen here. So I think Colorado is in a state of deterioration anyway in terms of quality of life. I do. And you take away the protections of TABOR overall, and California, here we come.
I think the state is ripe right now for Democrats to go after TABOR. You?
Well, I look at it in two ways. This is ancient history, but 22 years ago, I ran Raleigh Heath's campaign, for governor against Governor Bill Owens, a Republican. And Raleigh, there were people who wanted him to put that on his campaign platform. And Raleigh says, no, people like this, and I like it. I think it's a good tool, and if I'm governor, I'd like to have that tool. I mean, to go to the voters with, and it's been aggravating. We've seen Democrats take it to the courts. The courts said, it's not unconstitutional. I think it's been so ingrained in what we do that I think it'd be hard to eliminate it altogether. I think you got to gradually, and we've talked about this, and there have been ballot measures. Under Governor Owens, there were two. One passed to basically, chip away at it in certain ways, and we saw that being chipped away last night. I mean, with RTD, they debruced, for eternity. And we've seen that with some of the other local governments, and for the local governments, a lot of them don't feel it's a constraint. I mean, it's a part of the puzzle to be worked out.
Yeah, because voters remove the caps all the time.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, Jeffco. It's hard to believe that Jeffco was once a swing county, one that nationally was looked to as where is the country at? Yeah. Anymore, Jeffco is, it's getting as liberal as Denver.
I totally agree. And remember how that started, that whole proposal to debruce. They literally, the taxpayers paid for a political consultant to do a poll. Remember? I mean, these elected officials are getting so arrogant they don't think they even have to maintain any decorum in terms of how they conduct themselves.
Well, and voters don't care.
So California, here we come, Shaun. Honestly, I think that's what we're headed.
California, wasn't the brainchild of TABOR based on the California measure to...
It was.
And they still have that.
I think they've chipped away at it.
Well, I think they have chipped away at it too, but I do think they still have a law that requires voters to increase taxes.
I do think, though, that started the decline of California when they started doing that.
So KK passed. That's another tax measure that passed. The police funding measure passed, which will remove. That's going to be tough. $350 million out of the general fund that's already got $1 billion hole.
You won't be able to do much with your supermajority down there. I mean, you got some tough issues to take on with the $1 billion budget deficit. You have this new ballot measure that requires money. They're going to have to come up with some new fees.
Oh, don't give them any ideas.
I know. Well,
they will, though. I mean, they will.
And so no surprises that the state legislature went the way it did.
Well, I think it was a victory, if you can call it that. Not a huge victory, but it was a victory for Republicans to avoid a supermajority in the Senate. It looks like it will be one vote short. And the guy who probably is more excited than anybody is Governor Polis, because he doesn't have to deal with a bunch of stuff that otherwise would come across his desk. And then the House, I don't think it's changed any. But keeping that vote was important.
Mm-hmm. You don't have any thoughts on state legislative races?
No, I think that there weren't any that really stood out. I mean, a few Dems got it was closer than it should have been, I think for Governor Polis in his last 2 years, I mean, he has some ambition. Front Range Rail is a big deal, and that's something he wants to see on the ballot. And he's in an interesting spot now, being the head of the National Governors Association, and have to deal with the new president, who called him out when he was in Aurora, and so that'll be an interesting dynamic for the governor.
And by the way, the Republicans who did win last night on the legislative front, they did it on their own. Right. They got no support from these clowns who run the Colorado Republican Party right now, and I've just disparaged clowns by calling them that. And it's just shameful that we have a state Republican Party that absolutely did nothing for any Republican candidate unless they were election deniers like Ron Hanks or Dave Williams. And they're going to continue to run the party. So there you go.
And they're clowns.
And they're clowns.
Yeah. The gentleman.
Don't insult
you know
clowns.
What? I apologize to clowns everywhere.
Yeah, no, Dick will be on the clown list. But the gentleman who ran against you know, in the sixth against Jason Crow, and
Fabricatore.
Yeah, right.
Fabricatore. I saw a quote from him saying how he was just so frustrated that the Republicans in this state have no plan, no, you know, action items.
No.
They don't have a strategy, and you know, because he seemed very frustrated that, you know, he could have done better if there had been that.
He probably overestimates that, but his main point is correct.
Yeah.
There was no assistance. I mean, we spent, when I was chairman, I mean, not to brag, but we spent a couple $1 million getting the Republican vote out. And we got 106,000 more Republicans out to vote. Nothing like that happened in this.
No.
Anyway.
What about the animal measures? So the mountain lion hunting went down.
Yeah.
I really think that ties back to the wolves.
Yes.
I think people thought, boy, I voted for that. I wasn't really thinking with the wolf thing because, I don't know, I just thought, oh, that sounds good. Yeah, bring the wolves back. And then they saw what happened with the ranchers, and they kind of felt bad about it, right? Because it doesn't impact me, but I did that. Now these ranchers are having to deal with this, and it's not been good for the wolves even either.
No, it's been abusive to the wolves.
Both, yeah.
Yeah, and it wasn't close, and I think that'll send a message, you know, in the Denver ones related to fur and the slaughterhouse were not close because, you know, there were some feelings that, you know, that was just a test market to take it statewide.
Yes.
And so I do think voters sent a pretty good message, like, you know, stop bringing this stuff out here. We don't need it. I mean, and I do think that, you know, people, you know, learned a lesson from the wolf deal.
I think we have not heard the last of ranked choice voting in this
No,
state.
we have not. It will come someday because the one thing we do know is that there's a lot of frustration in Colorado with the two-party system. They watch the Democrats go towards the socialists, and we watch the Republicans go off the stolen election cliff. And I think that people know the political process is broken in Colorado. It will come back, and so and the Democrats and Republicans who opposed it, they're living in the past. They're living in a Colorado that doesn't exist anymore. 50% are unaffiliated. They want some change, and it will happen someday.
It was too complicated this time, though, right? And,
Well,
I think it was purposely kind of. I mean, it didn't need to be as complicated. They just said, like, include the counties too.
Yeah,
just
I
like
agree.
don't separate this out, and then they can say, well, you're going to get 2 ballots. Now you're going to figure this whole thing out.
Yeah.
Well, and I think if you just go with one, which is the open primary, because that's probably the best thing to do is just let people try that out first.
Exactly.
And then, and I don't know what happened. You know, Alaska had it on its ballot to rescind it. Of course, you know, Alaska won't know till I think November 20th on what happens with any of their races. But we'll see what happens if they've rescinded it. And but the open primary, I think, is very attractive. It kind of plays off the unaffiliateds and the fact that we have let unaffiliateds vote in the primaries. So let's get the open primary and test that out for a bit. On ranked choice voting, I think you got to go county by county. And, you know, Denver County is very ripe to try it out. Boulder County is very ripe.
Yeah.
Maybe even
Who's trying
Larimer.
it?
What's that?
Oh, Boulder City is trying.
Yeah, Boulder City is,
Not the
but
county,
you know,
you
take
said
it to the county.
Yeah, have a few counties try it out and prove that it can work.
Yeah.
Right. That we can still do the risk limiting audits and right. Lastly, did we talk about the Libertarian in CD8? Because that's one thing I thought. I thought when that Libertarian got out, I thought, boy, that's enough to put Gabe over the edge there. That he's going to have Libertarians voting for him, right? So I'm a little bit surprised that he isn't ahead.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Like I said, there's two third-party candidates that have gotten about 5,000 votes.
Yeah.
And I don't know where they lean on the political spectrum.
I don't either.
But that, you know, that in itself could be part of the equation.
And she played the abortion issue pretty hard. And there could have been some unaffiliated women who decided to vote for her because of that. So.
Given immigration, given oil and gas.
Yeah.
Well, she was the Republican nominee. I mean, she just like Frisch. I mean, she ran, I'm tough on immigration. I am tough on fentanyl. I mean, her record did not prove that, but she got away with it.
Well, she had some votes, though, in Congress that were siding with the Republicans, and that gave her, toehold. And she had a rating that showed her as being one of the most bipartisan. And we'll see. It may, if she is elected and reelected, if she's reelected, and then, depending on what type of, it'll be tough if it's a Democratic-controlled U.S. House for her.
Yeah.
Because they're going to come down on her to, get in line on a bunch of stuff. And if it remains in control of the Republicans, she still has some leeway of how she's going to play.
Shaun, I think one of the most revealing parts of your debate that you hosted, when she admitted, I don't personally agree with a lot of the positions that I'm pushing. That was a remarkable confession of hers. It was honest. I'll give her that credit. But I'm not sure I would be comfortable if I were a Democrat saying, really? So you really don't believe in these positions you're espousing to get elected? I think that was remarkable.
She did point out that she, was aligning more with how she felt her district would want her to vote.
I understand
and that does play to that you listen to the people that vote for you. So there's, I mean, I get what you're saying, but
it worked.
Yeah,
she
it
won.
did. Well, she's winning.
Well,
she's
that's right.
winning.
Okay.
We'll see.